This is my journey. Inspired one story at a time, a library of leaders was created. It began as a journey to learn. As time went on, it began to grow. All it needed was a platform, and this podcast was created to listen, to inspire, to share. I am a storyteller, and this is my journey. Welcome to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. I'm your host, Steve Anderson, and this episode is brought to you by Silna Health. That's S-I-L-N-A, the premium front-end RCM company that leverages technology with a team of onshore insurance experts to handle benefit checks, eligibility checks, and prior authorizations. Finally, a vendor that you can trust, like a full-time employee that scales with your business. Just mention the Profiles in Leadership podcast to receive a free trial. Our guest today is Todd Holzman, former leadership coach to IBM's top executives, head of organization development at Honeywell, and a fellow with McKinsey's Change Center. Todd has taught world leaders at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, developed doctoral students at Columbia University, and trained tens of thousands of leaders globally to get to Candor. As the founder of Holzman Leadership, a global consultancy, Todd's real work process has been used by numerous Fortune 500, FTSE 100, and Global 2000 companies to transform their leaders, cultures, and business results. Todd holds a BS in Industrial Labor Relations from Cornell University, an MA in Organizational Psychology from Columbia, and a Master's in Education in Leadership and Adult Development from Harvard. So, Todd, welcome to the program. It's great to have you on today.
Thank you for the great introduction. It's almost like I had sent you some bullets to read.
Yeah, a few. So, but I got to tell you that, in doing a little research for this, I saw somewhere where you had made the statement that you said that you really kind of struggled academically in your first year of college. And when I read Cornell, Harvard, and Columbia, those are pretty brainiac schools. So you must have figured it out, or tell us a little bit about
That's
that
very funny. Nobody's ever asked me about that. And I don't remember, it was probably some interview that I did. Okay, yeah. Well, the problem I had my freshman year at Cornell is I was trying to row crew and I fell in love for the first time.
Okay.
And so both of those things, I lost a lot of sleep because of both of those things. And so my studies definitely suffered, much to my parents' chagrin.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, as we all know, that freshman year in college is we grow up pretty quick, so that's a pivotal year. So tell us just give us a little context for us. So tell us about where you grew up and kind of how you got interested in doing what you're doing. And I believe you're based in New York City now. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Yeah. So just give us a little context on your journey.
Let's see. So first of all, the boring bits of kind of who I am. I mean, you read the bio. Thank you very much for that. I'm also the founder and CEO of Holzman Leadership. So we are a global learning and leadership development consultancy that serves a lot of these big companies that you had mentioned. But we also work with some smaller companies in the biotech space as well. Let's see. I grew up in Queens, New York, to a sports-loving entrepreneurial businessman father. Mother was a teacher. They're both very fond of teaching. So my father was always coaching and training somebody and teaching somebody in something. My father's brother was a psychiatrist who I developed a really great bond with. And my father would always ask me, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I would always tell him, basketball player, what a baseball player. Then at some point I was 12 years old and I said, I want to be a psychiatrist. And he said to me, well, why do you want to do that? You'll have enough of your own problems. and I really kind of, worshiped my dad. And so what made in hindsight look like a compromise ended up being the best decisions. So what I ended up becoming interested in is kind of this intersection between psychology and business. And so that's why I pursued the degrees that I did and tried to make a kind of a life, out of this work.
That's great. And I also listened, I think, and heard you tell a story a little bit about you're on a plane heading for spring break, and some guy next to you gets in a conversation and kind of inspired you to maybe that you could help people and help them, in a leadership mode. So tell us about that story and what effect that had on you.
Well, Steve, feel like we're definitely unearthing some things here. This is no, I'm very impressed with that research. Thank you. And they're very interesting questions. So let's see. I think it was kind of my junior year at Cornell, and I'm trying to figure out what am I going to do with my life. And I had friends who, were going to do what was expected of them. I mean, there's kind of a weird thing when you go to an Ivy League school. It may not just be exclusive with the Ivy Leagues, I'm sure. Your parents pay good money for it. I took out loans. My parents didn't have that kind of money. And, definitely their expectations. I mean, I remember my roommate um, really didn't like the law, but because his father was a partner at a law firm, he decided to go down that route. I don't know how he is today, but but he went down the route of having the 2.5 kids, the flat in the Upper East Side, the house in Westchester, and all of that. So I just saw a lot of my friends making choices that had nothing to do with what they could be good at or what their real aspirations were. And so I guess I was just seeking, Steve. And part of that process, I was reading a lot of what we used to call self-help books. Stephen Covey I was a huge fan of his, and other things like that. And yeah, I was going out on spring break, and I ended up talking to this guy on the plane, and it turned out that he was recovering alcoholic. He was 6 months in, had a strangely a poker chip, to signify 6 months, which I thought was ironic. But I guess
Yeah.
that's the humor about the whole thing. And then we go down to baggage, and he says to me, "Hey, I want you to have this chip." And because your conversation with me really, really moved me and inspired me, it's like, really? And so I kind of kept that in my wallet, my back pocket, for years. And it kind of gave me a sense of that maybe I could do something around inspiring people to live better lives and again, make a career and make a life out of that pursuit.
Yeah, it's amazing sometimes how sometimes in what you think are inconsequential exchanges or conversations, can have a profound effect. And I think that you and I that work in this leadership world and in this coaching world, sometimes we don't always anticipate or acknowledge that maybe the simplest of conversations really made a difference in somebody's lives. So it's a good story, and it's one that I think is worth telling again because we shouldn't sell ourselves short on the impact we can have on other people.
Thank you. Yeah, yeah, and it just reminded me at the same time I was kind of an up and coming. Oh, I wanted to be on the Taekwondo national team and ultimately get on the Olympic team. And I only started when I was a sophomore in college. So in some ways I started too late. I ended up being pretty successful for the amount of time I had in it. Um, but I also was coaching people who were going to all these competitions, people who had much more experience than me that were already black belts. I wasn't. And I found that I was able to kind of bring out the best from them. And so that also, taught me something. And I wanted my life to mean something. I didn't want to live this kind of, is it Thoreau who said most men live lives of quiet desperation? I did not want to go in that direction. And that's why I saw my friends doing. And so, yeah, that's what I did. And actually, my first job out of college, again, disappointing my parents, which is apparently a theme of this particular podcast, was I started a Taekwondo school, because I
Yeah.
wanted to keep pursuing my love of this martial art. But I also thought this was a really cool mechanism to, again, to work on inspiring people to live better lives. And I thought it'd be very cool to take this degree that I had and see if I could apply the stuff I had learned from organizational behavior to the building of a business. So it was kind of a really fortunate thing it seems like it was all kind of very lucky and fortunate, honestly. Not planned for at all. None of that was planned for.
So when you look at your martial arts training and the effort and time you put into it, what do you think you learned during that time that helps you today in working with others?
I mean, I think the most important thing I learned probably that wasn't what I was supposed to be doing.
Okay.
I think that ended up, I mean, that was one lesson. So it got me on a different, a continuation of the journey, but I think it pushed me in the right direction, because ultimately what I realized that I wanted to do was not Taekwondo, was again more of this core mission, and also do it in a way that I could do it inside of companies. And I also learned something about myself, that I was very obsessive with work, so that if I were going to grow into the person that maybe I could become, I would have to dedicate my work, and therefore a huge part of my life, to doing something that would force that, because nothing, I think, forces you to become better when you take on the responsibility on your own shoulders of making people better. And I think that's probably something that I haven't really thought about that question you're asking me. I also thought that it's an awesome responsibility to decide and to take on your shoulders, like, I'm going to help this person become, to live a much better life. And that's my job. Also, it's my job to help people lead a lot more effectively, which is a lot of what this has become. And despite my own foibles, my own insufficiencies, my own flaws, but I don't believe that helping people live better lives or lead more effectively is something you can do if you, it's not one of these things where those who can't do teach, because then you're just a hypocrite.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
so yeah, so it's a short answer to your long question.
No, I think it's really
I should
interesting.
call you Dr. Steve here. I need a couch to lay down on, Steve. What the heck, man?
Well, I just think it's interesting because you've been at this for a while now, and
30
when you
plus
were
years.
when you were trying to, as you say, find a career and working in this area, there wasn't a clear-cut way to go. There weren't, executive coaches everywhere. There weren't leadership training programs as much as there are today, and so on.
Oh,
So you were definitely a pioneer, and you had to kind of think and vision what that would be in a way that probably wasn't laid out clearly in front of you.
it wasn't laid out clearly, no. I mean, thankfully at Columbia, there was a degree in social organizational psychology, and there was then the field of organizational development. Um, and that was kind of a wake-up call for me. And that's what got me on the path of what I'm doing and continue to do, and growing a firm around where I have faculty all over the world and different practice leaders for the US and Europe, and for different industries, and all of that. So I go to Columbia, you know, thinking pretty highly of myself. You know, it's like, okay, I was kind of like, silver medalist in New York, was top 8 in the US as a middleweight after only doing this Taekwondo for a few years. I'd, you know, run a successful Taekwondo school with almost no turnover, which is unheard of. A school that was 150 people during the time that I was presiding over it. We lost one person in that whole time for a year and a half. Her name was Eve. Still bothers me. Most of turnover in Taekwondo schools is like 30 to 50%. Now, looking back, it's ridiculous that I'd be so high on myself because of that, but there it is, right? And I had read a lot of stuff on leadership and influence and communication and all that. I mean, I got trained by Ken Blanchard for a week back in the early 90s, because he's a Cornell grad, so I got that privilege. And I put myself through all kinds of soft skills training. It was just something I was really into, because I thought the most important thing in life is your ability to reason and communicate. And so then I go to Columbia, and there's this class called the Advanced Staff Training and Development or something, run by my mentor, Dr. Victoria Marsick, who's the chair of the Adult Learning Department at Columbia Teachers College. And they gave us this exercise where we had to interact with this character named Bert. And we had read how Bert had gave horrible feedback to this character named Ruthie, somebody who worked for him. And we all critiqued how Bert did it, and we all had beautiful ideas about how one should handle this kind of performance conversation, say, instead. And so then they rolled Bert into the room. We got a chance to give him feedback, and nobody gave him any feedback. They kind of hinted at it. They gave him suggestions, but no commentary on how he actually handled the conversation, despite him saying that's what he wanted, and despite us saying that's what we ought to do. And I saw this going down with my fellow students, most of whom were like, they're already working. Some of them like have executive level positions in big companies in the New York metro area. Get a lot of working professionals in this particular graduate program. And I thought, these guys are horrible. Let me show you how it's done, And I was like, okay, let me have a go at Bert. And unlike them, I gave him very direct feedback. I told him exactly what he needs to do instead. And that didn't go very well. And one of the people who had said, what we really need to do is get into a two-way exchange with him and really listen to what he has to say was me. But then I went into the conversation. Where'd listening go? I don't know. It was like I had this wonderful theory, but then my ability to behave according to it was really limited. And so not only did we notice how they had it now, the consultant came in and kind of debriefed this whole, drama that occurred, because of course we were blaming him, the way the consultant set up the exercise, the class, the barometric pressure in the room. I mean, anything but ourselves for how ineffective we were. And they unwound it, and we all started to take ownership for how ineffective we were, but also for our own inconsistency. We espoused one set of ways to behave, but then when we interacted with him, we just violated all of those things. And it was a real wake-up call to see, A, how incompetent I was, and B, in some ways, kind of hypocritical. You say one thing and you do another. And that was very disturbing to me. And then what they revealed was this research that had been done by amazing professor at Harvard named Chris Argyris. He's like the Einstein of the social organizational sciences. He got 14 honorary doctorates for his massive contributions to multiple fields, and revealed that there was this overprotective program that's been inculcated into all of us that gets activated whenever we interact with each other, and we're worried about how the conversation is going to go. And it blocks us from being as effective as we might be, and from acting according to our more noble principles. And then once I got hit between the eyes and kicked in the ass with that experience, I was like, okay, I have to dedicate my life to doing something about this. Because I thought, if this is as universal as it seems to be, if this is a huge blocker to people learning, interacting well with each other, to effective leadership, all of that. And Chris said, the next step has to be taken up by the next generation. I discovered this thing. Somebody else has to figure out what to do about it. And it looked like nobody was going to. I said, okay, I'm going to dedicate my life to this. And that's what I did ever since. And that was 94, I think.
Yeah, that's great. Well, it's interesting with that experience, and then also your other experiences in working with leaders over these years. How would you describe your strategy when you're working with leaders? If I were to say to you, hey, I think I might want to hire you, or get some of your expertise, how would you can your strategy is how are you going to work with me?
I think I first need to answer the question of, what do we even mean by leadership? Mm-hmm. And what is good leadership? Because the gentleman that I was taught by and had the privilege of teaching with at the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard, and this course was considered the premier leadership course across all the schools, and got to work with business leaders, but also international leaders inside of governments, like the Minister of Education from the Philippines was somebody that I was coaching when I was there. They had, and I now, and my firm has, a kind of very different way of thinking about leadership. Sorry, let me turn that off so it doesn't bother us. Excuse me. Most people think of leadership as, I'm an authority figure, I got a position, I got some power. Let me kind of cast a compelling vision of the future and motivate you to pursue it and support you along the way. And it's not that we disagree with that, but we have a complementary, perhaps a bigger conception of leadership, that it's fundamentally about mobilizing and supporting people to confront and deal with the real issues that are blocking us from having a better life and from addressing the opportunities which can make life, our organizations, our performance better. So it's something that somebody does, not something that a role that one possesses. And it needs to be exercised both from a position of authority, like when you're the authority figure, but equally beyond your authority. You know, it's important to lead people. It's important to kind of lead and influence your leaders, your colleagues. I think people in all walks of life. And so fundamentally, the thing that people need to ally themselves with the most is the truth. That in all of our interactions with each other, we need to speak and seek the truth and make that more important than anything else, than our egos, than our fears, than our desires, than our feelings. And so what I've spent my life doing is encouraging and equipping people to do that. And I didn't come up with this definition. It was one of my clients at one of these big pharmas, and we were researching why the program we did had such an impressive impact, unexpected impact. And his name, gosh, I'm forgetting his name right now. I'll see if I can remember it in a second. But he said with his British accent, which I won't imitate, he goes, at the end of the day, what you're teaching us is to treat every interaction with each other around important matters, with my people with me, with my colleagues, with my manager, with our customers, as a collaborative search for the truth in order to make things better versus a conflict to avoid or to win. And so I'll talk about the how of that, but that is the kind of North Star. Ed is his name. That's Ed Jenkins, who now is at another company. So hello, Ed, if you hear this, thank you for that. And that's been that articulation of leadership and our purpose to treat every conversation as a collaborative search for the truth on behalf of making things better has been the North Star of my firm and for myself personally since he said it, for the last 4 years.
Yeah, that's incredible, because if you think about it, I couldn't agree with you more but we live in an age right now where truth is hard to find. I mean, facts and you know, conspiracy theories or misinformation or whatever you want it is everywhere. And so to teach that and preach that and hopefully get people to, emulate that, is probably tougher than it was 10 or 15 years ago. Would you agree or no?
Tougher. No, I'm so glad you said that, Steve. Tougher and more necessary. And I think because it's tougher, people are longing for it more than ever. So we're writing a book on this now, and I just kind of started realizing this the other day. I mean, you probably feel the same way I do. Probably a lot of your listeners probably will feel the same way. I so often cannot figure out what's true, especially anything that's in the media, right? So let's talk about, I mean, forget about whatever our political persuasions are, right? I mean, the deportation of this guy to El Salvadorian prison. What's happening with the protester at Columbia University. I mean, first of all, depending upon whom I listen to, I hear different versions of the story, completely different versions. And they all sound credible, man.
Yeah.
And I don't honestly have the time or I don't want to at least dedicate the time that would be required to really get to the bottom of what's going on. But it bothers me that I don't know what's true.
Yeah.
And this is so much of our lives right now, and we're getting pummeled with this constantly. So, but we deep inside, I think we all long and we all gravitate toward what's true, even if sometimes things inside of ourselves are scared of it. There is still that voice that kind of pushes us and prompts us this direction. So maybe, maybe we could push aside all the noise from politics and the societal chaos and insanity that's kind of inflicting all of us. And at least in our daily interactions with each other, maybe we could make the truth paramount. And maybe it could be a bulwark against the insanity that inflicts all of us. And maybe in our interactions with each other at work, which is such a huge part of people's lives, maybe we could commit ourselves to being deeply truthful with each other and caring about what's true over everything else, over what I want to be true, what I think is true. Because together then we can have a more comprehensive understanding of what's true. And then on that basis, we can figure out what to do to make things better. And so I think it's more necessary than ever, in part because it's so much harder to find than it has ever been, I think.
Yeah, and that leads kind of to the next question then. What is it, and I think you've hinted at it here, but what is it that keeps people from performing at their best? What gets in the way?
I think it's, so first of all, I will say that it's the difficulties that people have in speaking and seeking the truth in their interactions with each other around things that are important. So not all of our conversations have to be heavy. I mean, we got to be able to have fun, man. We got to be able to recreational whinging. I lived in the UK for a while. They're very good at that. It's a sport. It's wonderful. Preferably, amplified by alcohol, like we're looking at over your right shoulder, for some of us. But when we're talking about things that matter, the truth is everything. Now, what gets in the way of that? I would say it's both mindset and skill set. Mm-hmm. And the thing that most people, and I do want to come back to your question of, so how do we kind of work with leaders on all this stuff? The error that people make is they think it's all mindset. If I just had more courage, I just need to lean into these conversations, like it's all going to work out. It's not. Most of us don't know how to get to candor competently. And what I mean by competently is you could have an honest conversation about the real issues, which does two things. You actually make progress in the real issue, an opportunity to make things better, and our relationship is intact, or it gets better versus gets worse. So the understanding of how to do this and do it well has been, grossly overlooked in the research. So yes, it's important to have courage, for sure. But what I really care about is competence. And this is what I've been researching now for 30 years and testing in the field with 50,000 plus leaders and people all over the globe, is if we're going to have a deeply truthful conversation that makes things better, what do you actually have to do? Like, what do you actually say? And what are the strategies you need to employ? And what are the tactics you need to avoid? We've been able to figure that out. And you hear me hesitating slightly because it's a never-ending search, but we figured out some things that work and don't. And we figured out how to develop people in these things in the context of the real world issues and opportunities that they want to address.
Yeah, and how important is language in that process? How you say things and the language that you use. I feel, it needs to be done skillfully.
I think it's less about word choice and more about two other things. The underlying intent that comes through how you behave with somebody, and the linguistic structure. So I'll talk about the so on the underlying sentiment, somebody, I should know who said this. This is horrible, but maybe you've heard this saying before, that who you are speaks louder than anything you can do. Mm-hmm. So so the importance kind of mindset or intent has to be one of like courageous humility. right? The courage to say what needs to be said, but the humility to be wrong. So that mindset's important. Also bringing compassion to these conversations, because it's not about winning right or winning a fight, and people are always going to say things that you think are insane or sometimes deplorable in this search for truth. But then in terms of linguistic structure, which is a strange phrase, I don't know how else to describe it. There are certain kind of things that people do which create problems, like, say, for example, leading questions, right? Is one of the errors when we look at the tens of thousands of case studies that we have, documented conversations that people have had that didn't produce the results they wanted. One of the big traps they fall into is leading questions. It's not really a question. It's a point of view disguised as a question. I'm trying to use it to steer you to the conclusion that I want you to come to. Well, the whole time I'm pretending like I'm just curious, right? So my partner, Olga, does this with me all the time. Don't you think we should do this? I say to her, if I would have thought it, I probably would have said it. But you can tell she's trying to steer me in a particular direction, which is kind of fun, like in amusing and entertaining, in life. But in business, it's really a problem because we know it activates the amygdala. It activates our protective responses, or for example, jumping to action is another huge trap that people fall into. So talking about a solution to a problem that's neither been discussed nor agreed, but everybody seems to do it, because we find all of our solutions or ideas about how to make things better very appealing. So we go there too quickly. And sometimes, hey, if we can get people to bite without us having to talk about the difficult issue, so much the better. So, whether somebody uses the word and or but or that kind of stuff, at least we have found is less important than people think it is, if your intentions are aligned properly, and if you're fundamentally being truthful and more committed to figure out what's true than to being right.
So you said the word just a few minutes ago, and it also came up in the bio that I read, and that word is candor. So, not a word that's used, every day and in common ways. So what does the word candor mean to you, and how do you use that?
Well, that's how we've defined it, as a collaborative search for the truth in order to make things better. And that's what candor is. So, this is like Kim Scott has a great book called Radical Candor. Most people don't read it, but they talk about radical candor and they think it's a big macho thing. Right now, I'm gonna step up and I want to be candid. Honestly, I just think that's nonsense. Because candor without compassion can be cruel, right? I remember this, one of our big banking clients, managing director for, I think, leadership and learning. She said they tried years ago to institute a value across the company, something like straight talk. We're just going to be straight with each other, which is cool. And I get the idea of it. You're trying to encourage honesty. Great. And that's really important because we can't solve any problem that we can't talk to each other about openly and honestly. So really important. But she said it gave license to every sociopath to say whatever they thought and felt. So the whole thing just kind of, backfired. So, the idea of candor is not saying everything you think and feel. That's wonderful for Olga's reality show, which is now on Prime, by the way, called Olga Knows Best. Shameless plug. It's also on TV. Yeah.
Okay.
By the way, I'm in it against my will.
Okay.
It's about her life, right? And also, it's not about only saying what you think and feel, because none of us has a monopoly on the truth, right? We each, what is it from the Bible? We each see through the glass half darkly. So maybe if you imagine life as some big, perfect, like window shade. Like maybe, Steve, you have a portal through one little hole through what's behind it. And I've got another little hole. Well, we got to combine our respective, conduits to the truth together in order to figure out what's actually, have a bigger understanding of what reality actually is. And only when we have that can we have any good ideas about how to make things better. And I've seen, and this is this thing about the truth, it seems I don't know, I hear Yoda in my head right now. He said was it Empire Strikes Back, uh, the truth is my ally, and a powerful ally it is. He said, no, the force is. And I feel the same way about
Uh,
the truth. And I've been very surprised and then have had my faith in this idea um, reinforced and rewarded when I've seen my clients take this on and the good it can do. So I remember when I mention clients, I'm allowed to, and when I can't, I just like give a fake name for them. But I remember, I lived in because of a big project with British Telecom. I ended up living in the UK for 3.5 years. I got to live in London, which was an amazing growing experience for me. And they had this division, which is now kind of a standalone company called OpenReach. So these guys and gals, they go up the poles and down the holes to fix the faults in the kind of telecommunications infrastructure, which makes everything that we're doing now work, right? Without it, it's the backbone in some ways of the UK economy. And these are the frontline managers, they're the people we were asked to train. And these are working class folks. They don't have their college degrees, and the more elitist types were like, there's nothing you could do with these guys. They're not educated. They're not going to be able to learn anything you have to do. And by the way, if they do learn it and they start having more honest conversations with their engineers, these guys who go up the poles and down the holes about opportunities to improve their performance, it's just going to make, at best, you'll get a little performance blip, but it probably will make things worse. They'll get pissed off. The union will get activated, and we're going to have more grievances, and sick absences will go up, by the way. So they were afraid of it. But I thought, these managers, they know their people, right? They work with them day in and day out. They know where their people could do better. And so they're probably just not talking to them about it in a kind of clear, compassionate, and credible way. And then we started to dig into it. We saw there was a lot of avoidance, right? I don't want to tell you that I think your productivity is low because of things you're doing, because we live in the same village. Maybe you're the godfather to my kid. Now I got to deal with you at the pub because of a work conversation that went sideways. So there was kind of all this stuff. But then it was called the Honest Conversations Program. We taught 2,800 first line managers. We took them through a one-day Honest Conversations program. And then we trained 100 of their mates to keep coaching them for a period of 2 years. And the results were, because of them, phenomenal. Union grievances went down, sick absences went down, productivity across their 35,000 person engineering workforce, because they each managed about 35 people, went up by nearly 9% in a way that was sustainable. That's a huge productivity improvement. And by the way, before we came in, they spent tens of thousands of pounds on all kinds of initiatives like process reengineering, getting them better technology. Productivity had remained flat as a pancake for 3 years prior. And then the CFO did some measurements of it independently of us and claimed in US dollars, the equivalent US dollars, it earned the company a cost savings of $120 million. And they were so happy with it that they told other companies in the FTSE 100 about it, unbeknownst to me, by the way. Then I started getting phone calls about that presentation from other companies, which is why I ended up living there. And I guess this is kind of corny, Steve, but it's like, maybe they were right. Maybe the truth does set you free.
Yeah.
And provided you could do it, you could turn it into a skill. And this is what I like about this, because this skill of candor, which I think is really the core of what it means to be a good leader, it's learnable. It's not, you got to be born with it, and it's accessible to anybody. I don't care what your rank is, what level you are in an organization, what your place is in society, your life history. I don't care about any of that, man. This is something I think anybody can access. And that leaves me feeling very hopeful. Because if anybody can learn how to do something like this that would actually make their lives, the lives of the people around them, a bit better, then we could all play a part.
Yeah. When you talk about the word candor and what you just described, it's, sometimes with experience and looking from the outside, you can maybe see the problem. And so we all know that by identifying that right out of the gate, well, here's your problem, doesn't always fly. But yet, if you can guide somebody through conversation and uh, proper questions, not leading questions, you said, but other questions, and they come up with it, it sticks a lot longer. So guiding that person down that path is a form of candor as well. Even if you come to the same conclusion that you could have said right out of the gate, I think it just sticks better.
Provided your questions are generally truth seeking,
Yeah.
right? Because a lot of times when we ask questions, we have an agenda,
Yep.
right? And we think we have the answer, or we see something. Yeah, we have the answer. We know it's true and we know what to do. And so when I say it's a collaborative search for the truth, it means it's also on you to express what you think is true,
Yeah.
and not just ask somebody else questions that help kind of lead them there. But that's the thing, right? If I express what I think to be true, I have to do it in a way that doesn't that isn't coercive, that isn't forcing upon you my way of thinking or my desires, that enables you. This was implicit, I think, in what you said, is that enables you to decide for yourself as an adult, as an equal to me, regardless of our hierarchical relationships, say,
Mhm.
to decide for yourself whether what you think what I'm saying is true. And that is the power of it. So if you're expressing truth what you think, and I'm just trying to do it, you know, to convince you of something, that is not candor. But if you're expressing yourself is meant to as a genuine inquiry into the truth of things, then it is. And so we both have to have these adult to adult we have to have adult to adult conversation with each other. And in doing that, I have to be as interested in what you think, particularly if it disagrees with what I think, as
Yeah.
I am in expressing what I think. And that's the collaboration, because what's more important is not what you think or I think, but ultimately is true. And that means sometimes you're just going to be wrong. And that's a little gift that the world can just give to us, if
Yeah.
we're open to it.
So we covered a lot of ground, in the last number of minutes here, and I just want to make sure we went down some tangents and some specifics, which were all very informative. Did I give you a chance to answer the way you wanted to, kind of what your strategy is when you go on and work with a client then?
So so first of all, when we work with clients, we're working with them in different ways, right? We have these leadership development programs that we do. We have actually sales training that we do. We have executive coaching that we do, and we have organizational effectiveness work that we do. The common factor across all of those, it's like we're not starting with some assessment or personality test, although things like that I think are very good, like Hogan is exceptional. We start with their problem, because the problems that we all experience, when I say problem, like some issue that I as a leader, or us as a group of leaders, or us as a group of salespeople, that despite our best attempts, we're not solving, or we're not making the progress on. I think these issues are calling to us. And within them exists so much of the learning that we need to be more effective and to realize our full potential as leaders and as human beings. So I start with problems that they care about, that are important to the business, but they're unable to progress. And that's where it starts. It's called our real work methodology. And we have a particular way of getting them to document the way they're addressing that problem, which is proprietary to us, but it's a foolproof tool that helps us understand how they behave in real life, not how they say they behave. And
Mhm.
so we're able to look at that, understand what their default behavior is under real life pressure in general from this specific instance. And we're able to see what's working, what's not working, and what's missing from their approach. And so after we start with their real world problems, then we use that data to create a realization experience for them, to help them understand, to see, to become more self-aware of where their own gaps or opportunities are. And that is quite eye-opening, like my Burton Ruthie experience many years ago,
Mhm.
and motivates people to want to learn, change, and behave differently in real life. But then, it's wonderful that you're self-aware and that you want to change, but it doesn't mean you can do it. This is what the research on adult development shows, that self-awareness is the quote from the research is a necessary but insufficient condition to change. So we have,
Yeah.
yeah, I know. I won't be able to say that again. I think I actually gave me a headache. And
Yeah.
then we have to show people what good looks like in the real world. And my team, the experts in my team, can actually produce the behavior they're trying to develop in the leaders that are our clients or in the salespeople that are our clients. So we have an influence program, and it's about influencing beyond your authority. They can demo the behavior, and not only in general, but in context of their situation. And we then give them these kind of very actionable tools that they can hold on to, that gives them guidance in the action moment on what to do. And then the cool thing that I really love is we recreate the situations the real life situations and the interactions they're going to have with their people and their clients and their colleagues and their managers outside of the workshop or outside the coaching session, during the coaching session or during the workshop. And then we say, okay, it's Monday morning, go. This is your real life simulation. And of course, they do all the things that they don't want to do, right? Because it's programmed behavior. And so they're like, what the hell is going on? Like the leading question and jumping to action. And what we don't do, so we call these Cornell real plays, not role plays, because most role plays are bullshit, right? Like it's a little fake role play. People give you feedback 5 minutes later, they clap and you sit down, but nothing's different. We say, okay, Steve, hold on. You just asked a leading question. Do you see that? You're like, no. Here's what you said. Okay, I did. Okay. What is your honest view on the situation? My honest view is X. And you say that because of ABC. All right, Steve, say that. So we're constantly stopping and starting these real plays to give corrective feedback. And then what's great about that, it helps them disrupt their old patterns, right? Because if you let it go, it keeps getting more deeply etched. And then they correct it in the moment and they see through their own corrections, they're able to get much better responses from the people they're interacting with this simulation of their real lives than they ever were able to get before. So we're building a new neural pattern, but we're also building confidence. So like, holy cow, this works. And now I finally see a way forward around this previously intractable business problem that requires me to influence, motivate, engage other people. And then you rinse and repeat that like over and over again on their challenge, on other people's challenge, putting them in a hot seat, so to speak, putting them in situations that feel like real life. And that's what we did at BT again. And they just do, just an amazing job. This is what helped IBM resecure the largest telecommunications deal in outsourcing history to the tune of $5 billion. This is what I did with them, with their salespeople. This was back in 2000 and whatever, something. And so that is, I think, the secret. This process, at least, that we call our real work methodology, is potentially one solution to a really pervasive problem in our industry. $60 billion is spent every single year on leadership development globally inside of companies, and the impact on their effectiveness and on business performance is something like this.
Yeah.
Because people are reverting back to their own ways soon after these programs are over. I gave for the Society of Human Resource Management Middle East North Africa conference 2 Novembers ago. I was invited to give the keynote on this issue to heads of learning and talent in Dubai. And this is exactly what we talked about. And this is the problem with the way we do development. We We don't create realistic enough practice. We don't really show people
Yeah.
what it looks like. The people who are developing them can't produce it themselves. And so we blame the organization for a lack of learning transfer, but the problem really is us and as providers and what we're doing with people when we get our hands on them.
Well, and I think you said the word perfectly. It's practice. It's just like anything else. You have to practice it. And if you go to a keynote where you're speaking or somebody else says you go to a leadership training program and you get inspired and you come back and you're all excited, if you don't do it or you don't practice it in the next week or two, it's gone. You're just right back to where you were before.
And that's the thing. I mean, remember my original purpose was inspire people to live better lives, but that's why I didn't become like a self-help guy, right? Because I had that realization at Columbia that I could talk a good game about this stuff, maybe. Maybe I could be inspiring from a stage or in a book, but wouldn't really make any difference to people because old habits die hard. And if we don't have some mechanism to help people break themselves in their old habits and replace it with something that's fundamentally better, then it's like all these great ideas I'm inspired about will be worthless.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think, as they say, practice perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me switch gears here a little bit. Looking at your website, you have a lot of coaches that work with you and in your organization. So my question is, why will they come and work in your organization versus just going out on their own and being executive coach on their own? What does your organization bring to them?
I don't know. Maybe it's just sheer luck. I always think there is an element of luck to all this. I mean, first of all, the way the kind of learning and leadership development industry works. So a lot of these people, they have they have their own practices, and the way they get work is, through their own efforts, but through providers like our company, like Holzman Leadership.
Mhm.
So one, if you could generate work for them, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Um, but I think a lot of the folks that I prefer to call them my colleagues that I get to work with and who inspire me and whose development I take very seriously. And it's not a one and done development thing with them, constantly trying to develop myself, them, all of it. So I think we have a sense of mission around this work, that
Mhm.
we do believe that the truth is the most powerful ally that one can have to improve the impact of one's leadership, to improve one's life in every single aspect. And that, I don't know, there's something very attractive about when you feel like you found something that really can make a difference to people. And that through our work together, we actually can make a difference in a way that really makes a difference to people and leaders, and sometimes is really measurable, and you can demonstrate the impact on actual a business and its performance. And that is like a really rare thing. Somebody who's like an executive coach or running some type of training program to be able to demonstrate business impact, that is like the holy grail. And we can't always do it, but we do it often. And I think, I don't know, it makes people feel proud, like they've achieved something, and feel more respected because of it, because a lot of times, if you had a job as somebody in learning inside of one of these large companies, a lot of times you're under HR, and then HR exists to serve somebody else. And maybe sometimes you feel unappreciated and you don't see the value of what you bring really recognized. And so a lot of those folks eventually, go out and hang their own shingle or will work with a firm like mine. And I think it provides them the opportunity to do something that they feel that really matters.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's probably
Well, okay. Well, Todd, this has been a great conversation. We've covered a lot of ground, but is there anything that I haven't asked you that you want to be sure and get into the program today?
Yeah, I guess a few things. I mean, one, if your listeners want any free resources, like just they can email my colleague Lace, Lace, at holzmanleadership.com. And you can put that in the call notes for folks too. My
Sure. No, that's great.
surname is Holv, M as in Michael, AN. So it's It's Lace, L-A-C-E, at holzmanleadership.com, and just put the name of this podcast in the subject line, and just say, send me stuff, whatever you want to say in the subject line, and Lace will make sure that your folks get that. I also say the book will be out this time next year. And then
Nice.
also we're developing an AI app, again, that may be a disruptor to the learning leadership development industry, because what I want people to be able to do is get the kind of high quality coaching they can get from somebody, let's say like yourself, who can really help them solve real problems and develop themselves as leaders and human beings simultaneously, and make it available to all, and not just to the 0.1% who get access to us. And so I'm trying to take all of the things that we've learned and training this artificial intelligence entity to provide the kind of coaching that we do to people in groups and one-on-one, that's available, and she'll never sleep. It'll be available to people anytime they need it, at the point where it can make the biggest difference to them in their lives and in their leadership.
That's great. Well, Todd, at this point in the interview, I always ask my guests the same common question. And that question is, in relation to leadership, what is a pearl of wisdom that you could leave us with today?
I think the most important thing is first of all, that leadership is your right and your responsibility, regardless of who you are, or what your place in the hierarchy is, or what your background is. We all have the right and responsibility to make things better. And your life and our world depends on it.
Yeah.
And the way to honor that, if you accept that challenge, your life will be better than you could possibly imagine. And the access to that is by speaking and searching the truth with a desire to do some real good for people and in the world. And you shouldn't do it because it will benefit you, but it surely would, even if it doesn't seem like in the near term.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. Well, Todd, this has been a great discussion. I've really enjoyed learning from you today, and sounds like you're doing great things in the world, and have enjoyed your journey along the way. So thanks for sharing that with us today, and it was great to have you on.
Thanks for a great conversation, Steve.
Okay, take care, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. To listen to all my interviews, subscribe to Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, and many other popular podcast platforms. Some of these interviews are on video, and you can search YouTube for Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson. You can also access the entire library of interviews on my website, orange.coaching.com, and that is orangetheword.coaching.com, and go to the Media Center and click on Podcasts or Video Gallery. You can also enter the website from pilpodcast.com. Thank you for listening to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. To listen to all my interviews, subscribe to Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, and many other popular podcast platforms. Some of these interviews are on video, and you can search YouTube for Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson. You can also access the entire library of interviews on my website, orange.coaching.com, and that is orangetheword.coaching.com, and go to the Media Center and click on Podcasts or Video Gallery. You can also enter the website from pilpodcast.com.